Now let's talk to Mr. Tony Agwans, researcher, senior lecturer, Anglo-Ruskin University in London. You're welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning, Olumide.
August 6th and 9th, 1945, a day that will live in infamy for the Japanese people, whether you're of Hiroshima extraction, whether you lived in Nagasaki or had relatives there. These stories have been told, the experiences have been recounted, and the impact is still there in those cities because of the dropping of the atom bomb on both locations back then. Now, that is also the location of this G7 summit, where the attendees, France, Germany, Canada, reads like a roll call of hardline anti-Russian sentiment nations who have taken that position. Now, it's interesting that leading to this meeting, it's just been about sanctions, 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 and no mediation. Could you begin by telling us what your impression of how this G7 summit will impact this conflict?
Thank you, Olumide, for that question. In fact, when you look at, the global geopolitical order, what we can always perceive is the fact that there are no permanent enemies. Like you have rightly situated, that this meeting is holding in Hiroshima, has great historical significance, considering that was one of the two locations that the Americans dropped the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb in 1945, an event that ended the Second World War. So, but ever since, relationship between Japan and the U.S. Have healed, and the two nations have been, working together. So, talking specifically about the G7 meeting that is holding in Japan this weekend, it is a very huge meeting considering the crisis in between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. So, and like you have said, we just hope that it gets to this stage where, world leaders begin to think of resolution and not just weaponry, support for weapons, and all the, bragging and all the use of military force. We are bait, because today makes it 450 days exactly that this Russian invasion of Ukraine began in February. We look back to February 2022. So we just hope, but people of good conscience, people with humanity, just hope that this carnage, currently going on in Ukraine now, will stop. So that is the point where issues are at the moment.
Yes, Mr. Agwans, you can accuse President Vladimir Putin of many things, but maybe stupidity is not one of them. There's a reason why he was continually bringing up the scare tactic threats of using nuclear weapons, deploying nuclear weapons. Whether he was going to make good on that evil promise is another thing entirely. But are the nations acting in such a responsible way as to make sure that that is totally taken off the table? It's not a Scud missile, it's not a cluster bomb, it's not a firearm, it's a nuclear weapon, whether it's atomic or hydrogen or any other thing that they're doing nowadays.
Look, Olumide, to be honest, the more this crisis linger on, the higher the probability that nuclear weapons may be deployed. At the end of the day, what are these weapons there for? So, you see, for Russia, who are the aggressor in this particular instance, for whatever reason that they may have, that is personal to them, that is, look, the Russian president, except, a neutral negotiator comes into this, and this is where I'll talk about that later. Pope Francis has been doing a lot in that regard. It will get to a stage where the nuclear weapons may be deployed, and it's most likely going to come from the Russian side. because they have it. We have seen drills, in Belarus, where the Russians have, have some drills and all that. So, but this is doomsday kind of thing, and the Russians have also threatened that, especially when Britain early this year supplied some accessories which contained, a nuclear radioactive material, Ethereum. The Russians threatened that, that the UK was escalating the crisis. So we never know, because the way this crisis is going is a case of the more you look, the less you see. But let's we wait and see what the G7 leaders will come up with. Yes. I feel very, very deflated that the United Nations have not done much in resolving this crisis.
Yes, it's quite clear, Mr. Agbons, that it appears they're calling his bluff. And as you say, you're quite correct. It's a doomsday scenario. It's Armageddon. It's end of the world type thing. But we hope it doesn't get to that point. Now, there's an interesting development where President Zelensky, and I think this is a show of confidence on his part, you'll let me know if I'm wrong, that he's setting up a committee or an advisory council on restoring Crimea to Ukraine. This is as the war is still undecided and the counteroffensive is still being expected. The posture of Ukraine at this moment, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I saw that report, and for me, it's just a confident booster that Mr. Zelensky, he's got a lot of support. In the last few days, he's been all over the place. He's been to some Scandinavian countries. He visited Germany. He was well received. He made a stop by here in the UK. And on the feed, we saw some of the things that were happening. The Wagner group, that mercenary group that is supporting Russia, there have been some issues there. The Russians themselves are not having it their way on the battlefield with regards to the boots that they have on the ground. Weariness is coming in from both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. So I think, this is just my personal perception, I think that President Zelensky is, constituting this council, for Crimea, is just to boost confidence and motivate and inspire his people. Like you and I know, Russia still called the shot in that region of Ukraine, which they annexed way back in 2013.
If you're going to take Crimea, you'd better back it up with a whole lot of, with a whole lot of power and punch, because the Russians, it appears, they don't seem to be thinking in that direction at all. But that's still a whole way down the road. As far as aid is concerned, the United States have said, as we've just reported this morning, that they undervalued the aid that they've sent to Ukraine in a certain area, and now they're going to be able to even send more aid to Ukraine because of this. As all these countries continue to send aid to Ukraine, as they send the weapons, as they send the money, as they send the support, what's your impression of how these items will be put to use to defend themselves against Russia?
Yeah, very well. They will be put, this military hardware and weapons will be put to use. You saw what happened a few days ago, the missile and drone attacks from Russia. And the Ukrainians were able to take about 6 of them down in Kyiv. So that's the power of, of military weaponry. So most of these were supplied by the UK and the Americans. So, in fact, with the valuation and devaluation scenario, I think it's a win-win for the Ukrainians. So the Americans, like you have said, will be able to supply more weapons. They are in discussion with the Dutch. They are going to supply them weapons, F-16 fighters, Norway, Denmark. I think the support from the UK have also sent a lot of weapons as well. But the only snag that most of us see as we look at this crisis is, for how long how long is the Americans, the British, Germans, and the other European Union countries and NATO, for how long are they going to continue to support Ukraine with weapons? For how long are they going to be spending their resources, their financial resources, and human resources to support Ukraine? Like they train the Ukrainian soldiers in the use of some of this equipment, because these things have a back effect on the economies of these nations. So because prosecuting a war takes a lot of financial resources.
NATO have answered that question, sir. They've said that they're thinking of a multi-year approach to support Ukraine militarily. So NATO is certainly not the people to go to if you're talking about mediation. They're looking years down the line, and it's just something that's very scary, to say the least. And recently, the talk of the town is the F-16 fighter jets that have been proposed by the British and the Dutch, to which Norway, as we just reported this morning, have said, no, we're not looking in that direction. These, obviously, you want to take a closer look at these planes, these military planes that are going to be used if it does turn out that they do get F-16 fighter jets. I know they're highly maneuverable. They do surface to air. They do, air to air and air to surface attacks, and they're very expensive, and they're quite sophisticated. And it will also bring a whole new dimension to this war, and it's also putting Russia in a position where they will send a strong message if all these items, including the F-16, get delivered to Ukraine. Not that they shouldn't get delivered, but where do you think countries who are now more neutral than these other ones should stand to make more concerted efforts to bring both sides to the negotiating table? And which countries do you think can have, at this moment, that same type of influence?
Before I answer your question, let me just quickly chip in that Norway, they are reluctant to send F-16 jet, but I think the talks with the Dutch, is progressing a bit further. But if Norway doesn't, there are other nations that will supply. Let's not forget that during war, like a war situation like this, businesses also thrive. This is one of the negative stroke positive side of war. Businesses thrive. So these things are not just really free when we look at it economically. So to your question, direct, NATO is not the go-to table for negotiations, because there will probably be, there is bias already. But I think Pope Francis, the pontiff, has been doing a lot. As I speak to you, he has sent emissaries. I think he sent the Bishop of Bologna to meet with President Zelensky. And then he sent another Vatican official, senior ranking official of the Vatican, to meet with President Putin. And there have been really positive feedback from both sides. So the Pope is doing a lot, and God bless him for that. Then, this week as well, some African countries, they are sending a delegation on a peace mission. Whether they will have the leverage to, do that, that is also ongoing. The Brazilian president has made effort, but is obviously has been said that he's, siding with Russia. The same applies to China, who have also made overtures in the past. So, but the more likely dispute resolution is going to come from Pope Francis. He's been doing a lot, and we hope that flies through.
What about the Africans? What about African leaders? There's been talk recently, yesterday, the day before, of an African peace mission.
Yeah, that's what I said. But I don't really know the African nations. Report have said some African nations, but I believe that probably South Africa, maybe Nigeria, Egypt, the top Kenya, top African nations from different corners of the continent. But I know that a lot of people are skeptical that if South Africa is in that group, they will be biased because, South Africa belongs to that BRIC bloc of nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They have that economic bloc within them. But for me, any effort towards resolving this crisis should be encouraged, and we will just see and hope that both the Russian and the Ukrainian side, they will, take a back seat and know that something has to give, because in negotiation, you win some and you lose some. It's a kind of 50-50 scenario.
Nations apart from the ones you've just mentioned, even farther afield, have expressed an interest. One surprising is Saudi Arabia, who've extended some sort of invitation to Zelensky. Do you think Saudi Arabia have any role to play?
Oh, absolutely. They are one of the big boys when it comes to the world economic order. Saudi Arabia, yes, they too have been playing a huge role. Remember, and Turkey as well. They call themselves Turkey now. They've been also doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work. You saw this week that the grain deal has been extended by another 2 months, even when everyone thought that there was not going to be an extension, because Russia have said their own export is suffering, so they are not going to allow the Black Sea to be used and the channels for the logistics. They're going to close it, but it's been extended. So Turkey and Saudi Arabia too have also been playing a huge role. So there's a lot of negotiations going on behind the scene. And I must say, because I live here in the UK, the British Prime Minister too, who is he's new to world politics and all that goes on in diplomatic circle, he's also be pulling some strings. I'm aware of that. So we hope that all these efforts will come together, and then the Russians and the Ukrainians can be brought to the negotiating table. That has not happened for many months now. And we, international observers and keen observers, believe that that should be happening, because this battle is not going to be won on the field. It's going to end on the negotiating table.
If we've learned anything in the last few months, it seems to be that the sanctions against Russia is like water off a duck's back. They seem not to be working. Whether you're targeting the oligarchs, whether you're squeezing their financials, whatever it is you seem to be doing, the Russians seem to find a way to keep afloat and to keep prosecuting this war. Is there anything the West or the allies of Ukraine are missing?
Yeah, it is really surprising. People don't really understand how Russia has been able to survive the huge sanctions, and it doesn't seem to be having any effect on them. So for me, I just think that what the West should do is to talk. I think it's to talk. So all this grandstanding and show of force obviously has no faith. And let's not forget that when you look at Russia, they are one of the superpowers in the world. So if you look at it militarily, I don't think Russia will ever lose the war. This is my opinion. They won't, because they are a superpower. It's like saying that the US, they go to battle and they lose. It's not going to happen. So what I think the West should do is to talk. So in any way they do that, whether via proxies, because they may be may feel like a disgrace, they may not want to do it themselves. They have to find an avenue to talk. That is just what I would say on that question.
Thank you, Mr. Agbons. If Russia doesn't lose the war, a worst-case scenario is if it becomes another Vietnam, another Afghanistan, another situation that just continues to defy a solution. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Mr. Tony Agbons, researcher, senior lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University in London.
Thank you, Olumide. Have a great day.
You too.